outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everyone and good evening. I'm Seema. I hope you've all had a good weekend and a good start to the week. This is my last week of intense work and then I'm going to the airport on Friday. I'm going to get onto a plane and I'm disappearing for 10 days, so I really can't wait. I think it's been quite an intense term for me and I've really enjoyed it as well though, but I'm ready to recharge and then come back and do it all again. So yeah, enough about my holidays. So on the last show, we talked a bit about voice in the classroom and how teachers can use their voice more effectively to engage students and to motivate them and to open up trust. So today, what we're going to be talking about is performance, because I suppose that teaching does have a performative dimension to it. And to discuss that with me, I've got Konstantinos Pappas, who is a senior lecturer and course leader of BA Public Relations. Hey, Konstantinos, how are you?
Hi, Seema. Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
No, thanks. I'm so excited to have you on. And, we often have like conversations in the hallway or the staff room when we bump into each other, but it's actually nice to get an opportunity to just, talk in a more intentional way. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this topic with you. But before we do that, why don't you tell our listeners a bit about who you are and your experiences?
Yes. So where do I start from? Okay. It's been now 5 years that I work at the UK university. Before that, my job experience mostly revolved around media communications and political PR. However, alongside that, and maybe referring back to my kind of more early days as a professional, I have worked in primary education, in secondary education, also in lifelong learning education with adults. I used to be a teacher of French, history, and then when it came to adults, I was teaching creative writing. So a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, I remember actually when I found out that you'd worked in a primary school as well. And I I completely wasn't surprised because I could see, like when we talked about where you developed your sort of approach and your methods from, I was kind of like, I wonder where you got this from. And then it all kind of made sense when you told me a bit about your background. But I do think that's quite rare as well. I don't think I've come across many people that have taught across that vast a range of ages. I feel like usually when I meet people that, teach adults and young adults, it's just at university level, or if you're in a school, it's just at school level. So I think that's really rare and must be so valuable in terms of experience.
It is, to be honest, I truly cherish all these experiences. And if I'm honest, when I was a child, when they were asking me, what would you like to do when you grow up? My first initial response was to become a journalist. But
Oh, really?
Yes. And I kind of made my dream come true. I studied journalism, I worked as a journalist, but then somewhere alongside, it came also the opportunity to start teaching. I remember my first experience as a teacher was through a European exchange program, and I was teaching in a vocational high school in Portugal for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when I thought, okay, I like this very much. Is it possible I could combine these things? And this is how it all started back in 2006.
Wow. Okay. So you've also got experience of teaching in other countries, which is which is fascinating. I mean, I kind of now feel like I want to do a show with you on a whole different topic. But
Anytime.
yeah, and also like that's something that we have in common around the journalism side, because when I was like a teenager, I was obsessed with journalism. I used to spend a lot of my teenage years hanging out at my local community radio station and sort of living and the life of like a little teenage journalist. So I trained in, you know, all of it, like interview skills, radio skills, editing, presenting, all of it. And I was just really curious, I think. And I just loved kind of understanding different topics and people and all of that. So I guess it's no wonder that we're both working in the media school, because it's also connected.
Yes, exactly. That's amazing. I also didn't know this about you,
Yeah.
but the way you put it, I mean, curiosity and the aspiring to know more things, somewhere there also clicks also the teaching thing,
Mm.
because this also refers to the aspiration, the willingness to get to know more things and to pass this on and to share
Yeah.
this with others.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And, you know, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in terms of how you pass it on. And, you know, I thought of you, Konstantinos, for this conversation because I remember not long ago we were talking, and we were talking specifically about how we feed back to students. And, you know, that went off in all kinds of directions. And in the process, I remember you said to me that, you know, we have to be like actors and clowns to really engage our students into what we're doing, and have all these different roles that you play and changes that you make and how you communicate to make sure you can really get through. And I guess I wanted to explore that more with you, because I think we're on the same page with this. And I just love to talk about it. You know, I also find that if I want my students to understand something or to learn something, I've got to really make an effort to perform it and to make it entertaining in some way or another. And I feel like that's a significant part of my job as a teacher. I feel like if I was just communicating information and not thinking about how I say it, then I don't see the point of me as this middleman. I'm just, you know, anyone could do that. So what's your feeling about this, and where did this idea, you know, about being an actor or being a clown come from? Let's get into it.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, the initial idea stems more from a concept, a widespread concept about the placemaking of a classroom. Okay, the classroom, if you see it from outside, it resembles to a courtroom. It resembles to a place of worship, a church, a mosque, where an authenticity is talking to a passive audience. And topographically speaking, the classroom with the desk for the educator and the desks for the students might resemble to that. So my initial thought is that I wouldn't like this to be repeated. I wouldn't like my classroom to resemble to any type of one person, one authenticity is talking, and someone has to digest this no matter what. That was the initial thought. Secondly, many times educators, teachers, university professors, they take for granted that students or learners, they are there because they have all the willingness in the world, all the time at their disposal to come and listen to you
Mm.
without interfering, without asking questions, without doubting you even. And sometimes we might fall into the trap that, what I have to tell you now, believe me, it's very interesting. Well, it might be very interesting to you. The point is to make it interesting also for someone that is not necessarily 100% invested in what you have to say. So it all stems from your desire to make them participators of the knowledge and not just passive receivers of knowledge. So these were the main reasons that I had in mind.
I really love that, those points, and this thing that you just said about, like, it really resonates with me when you say that it might be really interesting to us, but it's not about what we feel about the material. It's how do we make it interesting to them? It really reminds me of, so I think it was, a good, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something, but I went to the West End, and I don't know, have you seen The Woman in Black?
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay, right. So I didn't have a clue what it was about. I think I still don't remember what happened actually in that play, but I just remember the first scene, and it was performed so well. But the message was have sympathy for your audience. So, if you're a speaker or a teacher, whatever, I know that what you have to say is important, but think about the people that are receiving it and how they need to hear it. Exactly what you're saying, right? How do they need to hear it in order for them to take an interest? So, I remember he had this, he was like, if you're talking about a long entrance hall, then let them feel the length of the entrance hall. And it was all about kind of bringing life and attaching meaning to what you're saying if you want people to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that really stuck with me. And I guess I believe that if we don't consider that element of performance, then we could be losing out on an opportunity perhaps to help people care.
You are very right into that, and the metaphor is exactly to the point. Because after all, I mean, yeah, we are actors, but not in the sense that we act as if we are someone else. It's not like we invent a role or someone gives us a script and we have to breathe life into a role. The difference between teachers and actors is that the teacher has to play their own selves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning that you are not you are honest, you are not pretending to be someone else, without this meaning that this gives you the right to be exactly yourself. I mean, like, if you have had a very bad day, if you are facing any issue in your personal life, it's good if you don't carry that into the classroom. In that sense, it's a role. You have to dress, you have to get dressed with this new attitude, let's say. Stay yourself and bring yourself to the stage of the classroom and see what happens, see how this unfolds.
Absolutely. And, that's a very important distinction that you make there between a teacher and an actor. And we do have to be ourselves. So there's this kind of aspect of personality too, right? And I just wonder, like, what do you think, Konstantinos, about, if I think about some of my colleagues or I think about other people that I know who are teachers, I think perhaps certain people would feel perhaps uncomfortable about performing in a certain way, and they wouldn't feel like it's true to who they are. Maybe they wouldn't want to be really loud or comedic. So what do you do if it's not, a part of your personality to be that way? But then we're saying, well, you need to entertain and you need to make it interesting and, really catch attention and perform. What do you think about that?
Well, I can totally understand if someone is working within the teaching sector but doesn't necessarily feel at ease to expose themselves or to become more of an actor in the classroom. In that case, my advice would be then jazz up your material. make your material a bit more visual appealing, ask probing questions, bring a personal experience that students and learners can resonate with, without this meaning necessarily that you have to be a clown. Even from your desk, sitting down in your desk, but make sure that the aiding material, the rest of material that surrounds you, might replace your lack of being actor, let's say.
Yeah, I agree, because there's nothing worse than, if you're not sort of that personality type, but then your material is also very presented in a way that's not very accessible, or you're sort of just reading off slides which are very text heavy. And I guess that if you do want to be, have this element of performance, I think equally your materials have to support that, right? So, I mean, I know that I'm sort of, I'm quite minimal with text on the slides that I usually use, and I try to use lots of visuals, and the visuals are more they're more for me as a prompt to remember what is the story that I want to tell with the slide, or what is the point that I have to make, but also to create a bit of curiosity in the students, like, okay, why is there just a slide with a picture of a gorilla on it? What's that about? And then, at some point as I tell the story, it hopefully becomes clear, the gorilla's part in the story, or whatever, But yeah, I think it kind of works both ways, but I think it's a very good point, because the materials and the approach have to complement each other, don't they?
Yes, I mean, if I don't know, you don't feel like you don't enjoy teaching, you don't have the inspiration necessarily to create engaging pedagogical stuff, or then I don't know. I mean, teaching in itself, it's exhausting. It requires energy.
Yeah,
So if you do it, it must mean that you like it, that you want to do it. Otherwise, there's so much admin job behind teaching. There's so much other type of duties. You can be involved in research. I mean, don't torture yourself if you don't feel like doing it, if you don't
yeah,
enjoy teaching that much, neither preparing some engaging and good material.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's true. And I think perhaps it's part of, the skill of the job, and maybe our responsibility to equip ourselves with those skills. Because it is very important, even, in terms of helping students retain what we're teaching them, right? I think if we can bring that element of performance, then it makes it more memorable. It makes it easier for them to, actually retain what we're talking about. I think there's so many sort of aspects that actually complement their learning. It's not just to make it fun in the classroom, right?
Yes.
So just a reminder to everyone that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, who are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So if you want to level up your professional development today, do make sure that you visit hachetlearning.com to explore their full range of titles. Also, teachers, do be aware that Teachers Talk Connect is back. It's the annual CPD and networking extravaganza. You can join the TTR team on Saturday, the 14th of March in Manchester, and the tickets are free. So make sure that you head over to ttradio.org/connect 2026. So, Konstantinos, what examples do you have of how you bring that performance to the classroom? Like, can you paint a picture for me of things that you do, however, simple or crazy?
Okay. promise not to laugh. I have two
I'll
stories.
try, but
I have two stories in mind. One refers to university education, one refers to primary school education.
Mhm.
So, some many years ago, I was teaching history to 11-year-olds. Okay.
Mhm.
And the topic, the chapter of the day, it had to be around the ancient Greek and Persian wars. Okay.
Mhm.
I could see the students so bored trying to retain names of protagonists in the battles, name of the locations of the battles, and who did what and when exactly, and what was the geopolitical importance of it. And I mean, they were 11 years old, so I saw that in their eyes. That's another important aspect. I mean, you may have your guidance, you may have done your preparation at home, but then you go in the classroom where it's the real trust test, and you see that what I had in mind doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I saw in their eyes that they were so disengaged and bored. So I told them, okay, we have half an hour left. Let's take the desks to the edges of the classroom and we will do a simulation of a battle. So,
Sorry,
so
I wasn't meant to laugh, but this is brilliant.
you promised though. So, okay, uh, the classroom, everybody became so engaged instantly. They were all so curious to learn. What did you say my name was? Ah, okay, yeah. And where did you say this took place? Okay, so it had mountains. Okay, and you could see them suddenly becoming so invested, so interested that okay, it's easy to lose control within that. Okay, you have to always be on alert, you have to always keep your eyes open. I mean, if things go out of hand, which hopefully didn't, but that was an amazing experience for them. Months after that classroom battle, they were coming to me and they were saying, "Ah, yes, we remember that, and we remember that name, and yes, Alexander the Great, he did this, and the Persians did that," and that
Oh,
was something really memorable.
yeah. That's such a brilliant example. I love it. And you know, this whole thing of like, let's get all the desks and put them on the side. I think it's such a great like technique, you know. I I mean I don't use it to like, you know, do battles with in my classes, although I might consider it now. But but you know, like sometimes just, you know, getting the tables all to the side and getting the chairs sitting in a circle or like standing and doing something, it just changes the energy in the room immediately, doesn't it? It gets people up, it gets them active, and I think it also breaks them away from like their laptops and their phones. And yeah, I think it's a really good technique. But I'm dying to hear your other example, so please tell me about that as well.
Okay, the other example is not as dramatic
Mhm.
or as funny as this one because it refers to university education.
Yeah.
So I remember, I think 2 years ago, I was teaching a module which is called Professional Industry Practice.
Mhm.
And we were preparing our students to face, let's say, the industry, to first of all learn how to present themselves, how to pitch themselves. So one of the activities that we had to do during seminar time, it was to come up with an elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is when you pitch yourself to an employer or to a networking event. You meet someone very interesting from the sector you want to work in, and you want to pitch yourself. And it's an elevator pitch, meaning that it has to last while the elevator reaches your floor, let's say. So I said, okay, yeah, let's try that. And I wasn't prepared for what they said. They said, could you please do it first yourself so that we take some ideas?
Mm.
And then I was a bit, shocked. I was,
Put on the spot.
how do I do this now? And within seconds, I went in the middle of the classroom so that everyone could see me. I asked everyone to make their tables in a circle so that my exposure would help them to feel less exposed when their time would come. And then I started pitching myself using, pretending that I am talking to someone very interesting, very much into my sector, who was much taller than me. And even playing with these notions, to show that I was a bit stressed, but it's okay to be stressed, but I won't miss this opportunity to talk about myself. And then I came up with everything that I do. I mean, I'm from the piano lessons I'm doing in my crochet to my PhD, to anything. And I saw that instantly again, that it helped them so much feel comfortable. And they thought, okay, if he can do it, let's say the teacher, okay, if he can do it, then why not? We can also do it. It was,
Absolutely.
it was a success, yeah.
I think that they're both great examples, and I think I like that they kind of said, "Well, can you show us first?" And they put you on the spot, but then you just went for it, because I think it's important that we show them our vulnerabilities too, right? And we kind of, how you said you showed them, oh, I was feeling a bit stressed, and because then it helps them, as you said, realize that, okay, that's normal. We all have to kind of experience these emotions, but it's the practice gets you through it, right? The more we try and practice and just put ourselves out there, it just helps us to get through that. So do you think that taking this approach sort of encourages more students to respond and join in? Or do you think that it kind of, I mean, because I've seen in my own classes as well that, yes, it's really great with, I'd say, the majority of students, but then you always end up getting the ones that are a little more shy, kind of retreating a little bit more. So what do you think about, how this approach works for different types of students?
I think you mentioned a very key word, vulnerability. And if I can speak for myself, I remember my student years that you, how can I say, the teacher was just a teacher. The teacher was not a human. The teacher didn't have the right to be emotional, to show vulnerability, to show that they can do something wrong, or to make us laugh. And I will answer to your question with another example. Some years ago, again in university, I had to talk about a very complex concept, which refers to how can we ethically persuade at a public level an audience through appeal to their emotion. And there were so many theories and scholars that I had to make reference to and support students, try to make them understand. I remember that in one of my slides, I had the photo of my two dogs. I have two dogs now, they are 3.5. They are, oh my God, they are crossbred with devil, but it's it's our fault. We have spoiled them. But it was kind of recent when I adopted them at that time. So I used that slide with their photo from the Facebook ad that I saw. They were rescued and they were in a shelter somewhere in rural Greece. I was there for my summer holidays and I had just lost my beloved dog. And I showed them the photo I described to them the text, and because of the fact that losing my previous dog was so recent, I had tears in my eyes at that time. And I explained to them that with the text and the story that the Facebook ad provided about these two small dogs and the photo that they look so cute and sweet and innocent, this totally spoke inside me. It appealed to my emotion. So I went, I adopted them and never thought back and never looked back to that. That was another, what you said, I mean, the vulnerability, it brought this example to my mind. Not only I showed vulnerability in front of the eyes of the students, but it was a perfectly applicable example of a complex concept, the appeal to emotion when we talk about persuasion.
Absolutely. I think I've seen that too, actually, that when you're vulnerable and you give your own examples, I think also it just kind of humanizes us and it puts us onto a more kind of even playing field, right? Rather than the teacher up here and that's really, really experienced and the student over here who's not very experienced, right?
Yes.
I've noticed that students love hearing all the war stories, right, of your experiences and what happened with you and how did you overcome this situation or that difficulty. And like I go back to what you said at the beginning where you were like, I saw this thing in their eyes, and you can read things if you're looking, right? You can, the clues are all there if we want to look for them. And their eyes just light up when we tell these types of stories, when we share our own experiences, and I guess bring a bit more of ourselves to the classroom. And so I think that element of performance, it's not just about, being, loud or, entertaining in a particular way, but it's also being, vulnerable and being emotional, and sharing like more of who we are in front of them. And I think that ties us back to that really good point that you made earlier about the distinction between a teacher and an actor, right? Which is that we have to play our own self. But if we don't bring ourselves into the classroom and into the conversation, then, they don't really get the full picture. They do just get the information.
Exactly. Yes, you are very right. This refers exactly to that, because you can build a persona if you want. It can be your teaching persona, but you will not, and you cannot be, you will not be able to correspond to that persona at all times. You will need to keep up at all times. You will need to come up with things that that persona would think, that the emotions that that persona would demonstrate. So you have to be yourself. And as we said, yes, entertainer, clown, but sometimes the clown can be a sad clown. That's part also of show emotion, of showing, who you really are. All this makes you much more relatable to students.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps them to, talk to you in a more real way as well. And I think, it is important that they see that balance because, we can't always be, high energy. We aren't. And I think when you have too much of that all the time, there's a risk that teachers are at too, right? Of that burnout. I mean, we already are with the multiple things that we have to balance. But if you have that sort of high energy performance all the time, all day, every day, it's too much for anyone, right?
Yes,
Do
exactly.
you ever find yourself like, how do you feel at the end of, a class where you've kind of been really performative, I guess? Because I think, if I think about it for myself, I have this kind of mix where on the one hand, I come out of the class and I feel really energized, I feel really, really energized and I'm buzzing. But then when I go home, I'm equally like, okay, I'm flat now. I've got nothing left. I mean, that might be the introvert in me as well, you know, because my battery runs out and then I'm sort of like, okay, I'm done now. I don't want to talk. But how is it for you? What do you feel like after a kind of high energy performance in the class?
I think you are at a much better stage than me because I I feel knackered the moment I step out of the classroom.
Oh,
I
really? Okay.
Yeah, because I mean students have noticed that. They
Yeah.
said that when you are not jumping from place to place in the classroom, and we are talking about adults, we are not talking about 10-year-olds. I mean, uh,
Yeah.
and they have mentioned, they have noticed that even when you don't jump from place to place in the classroom, your facial expressions never stop. And I remember them sometimes smiling or trying giggling or trying to hold back their laughs because apparently my eyebrows are doing their own game when I listen to them talking. So, I mean, anything can be high performative and energizing. So, to answer your question, because I keep giving two big answers, sorry about that.
No, no, go for it. Like we've got time. Go for
The
it.
thing is that, yes, the moment that this performance, let's say, ends and I close the door behind me, I feel exhausted, drained, but so rewarded.
Oh yeah.
So this kind of balances the physical tiredness with the mental high, let's say. I feel high in a tired body. That's the
Yeah.
combination.
I get it. I get it. And I think like that's probably the experience of a lot of teachers, right? You know, I always joke about it, but I mean, it's so true. I always say, you know, when I walk out of my classes, I'm like, you know, after the kind of you come down from the high, I'm like, I just want to go and lie in a dark room now, you know.
Yes.
Um, but not because I didn't enjoy it, but because I'm just so exhausted from the
No,
interaction.
no,
I think
no.
if
Very
you
enjoyable. Always, yes.
absolutely, yeah.
But you just need a little bit ceiling therapy, as I call it. You just look at the ceiling and you just don't talk.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard that phrase. I'm going to keep that one. Ceiling.
Okay.
I'm just literally writing it down. I'm like, okay, that is such a good way of putting it. um,
Yes.
so just a reminder to you all that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They're publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hachetlearning.com to explore their full range of titles. You can also join BET for the biggest week in education, which is from the 21st to the 23rd of January 2026 at the Excel in London. They've got immersive workshops, thought-provoking speakers, hundreds of hours of CPD accredited content, cutting-edge technology, and unrivaled networking. So there's no opportunity quite like it for educators. You can get your free ticket today by visiting uk.betshow.com. That's bet with a double T. I'm going to be there as well, actually, on the Thursday, the 22nd. So if you do happen to come down, make sure you come and find the Teachers Talk radio stand, and I will be there in the afternoon. So, Konstantinos, I was just thinking, actually, I was like, you know, that's exactly what's going to happen to me after we end this. I was going to say end this call. I keep forgetting we're actually like other
Yeah.
people are listening to us. But yeah, like after this is over, I'm going to be like complete silence, going to have my ceiling therapy.
Yes.
So, but I guess
Highly recommended.
yeah, they're the joys of teaching, right? It's that contrast, but you know, you just love it and you go and do it all over again. So
And I
yeah.
think teaching in itself, I mean, the nature of teaching, 1 hour of teaching corresponds to, I don't know how many working hours. That's why teachers cannot teach like machines. I mean, even in primary education, secondary education, you cannot exceed a certain number of hours per week. It's not feasible to teach too
Yeah,
many hours.
absolutely. I mean, like, I take my hat off to people that teach in primary schools and secondary schools because I feel like, the actual contact hours of teaching are probably a lot higher than we have to sort of navigate in universities. But, I don't know. Our lessons are also quite long where we teach, right? I mean, sometimes I'm doing a 3-hour class, then I've got a 1-hour break, and then it's another 3-hour class. And it's so different to my corporate world days because I came from the corporate world as a practitioner where your FaceTime with people was probably, I don't know, like not more than about 2 hours in the day. And the rest of the time you're kind of behind your laptop, doing emails, doing work. And then you go into a meeting, you've got to show up and perform for like an hour, and then you're back to your desk again. And so when I came into teaching because I started off just doing guest lecturing, and it was like, oh, this is great. But then you come in once every like 2-3 months, and it's just like an hour. But then when you start doing it more regularly, then you go, okay, that's why teachers get like 6 weeks off in the summer, and because it is, mentally, it does require a lot from you, especially if you are making an effort to make it something, that does mirror some kind of performance, and you're trying to take all of that energy into the classroom with you. And I think I can't remember who I was talking to, but, they said, well, when the students engage, it's more satisfying, but it's more tiring as well, right? Because, it's a great thing. You want the students to engage, but then you need to give more energy back. And it's like this constant mental sparring. And I think it's so true. I think it's so true.
It is, but let's all admit it. I mean, we want those students.
Yeah,
Every
100%.
teacher is longing to have such students in the classroom. Otherwise, the time doesn't pass. I mean, yeah, it will be more energy requiring, but it will be so much more rewarding.
Absolutely.
It justifies your effort. It justifies your choice to be a teacher.
Absolutely. I think it does make the time pass a lot faster. And it also just sort of lightens the environment and the atmosphere, right? There's nothing worse than sitting in a classroom where students are not engaging. And, that brings its own heaviness and pressure to the atmosphere. What about for the students, Konstantinos? So, like, a lot of students are experiencing anxiety and stress. So, do you think that bringing that performative, element to the classroom can perhaps aid in reducing some of that? Or do you think it might heighten it? What do you think?
Okay, first of all, every student, it's a different universe and it's a totally different learning journey for everyone. And the experience has to be personalized. This can happen only during one-to-one tutorials, and that's shout out to our previous discussion back in summer. So when it comes to a classroom, of course, you need to take into consideration special requirements, students that they experience any type of mental distress, learning difficulties, anything. I believe that the high performative type of teaching can always work for the benefit, even for the most sensitive student, in the meaning that it might even help them forget about their own thoughts in the meaning. Sometimes there can be students that they think, I don't understand enough. I am afraid to ask this question in case it will sound not very smart. Different type of thoughts that might hold that student back. In that sense, when you are extra performative in the class, when you make use of your body movements and gestures and all this, sometimes the attention from the darker thoughts, from the thoughts that keep a student, let's say, out of the participation, might become a bit lighter, might help that student distract themselves from their own thoughts, and maybe tell them that, look, something uh, entertaining, something fun, but not in the meaning of shallow or flashy, something is happening here. Let's turn my attention towards that, and let's see how that goes. This is my thought, and that's why I believe that there's always a benefit, even for the most demanding student, for the most, the student with the mental distress or other types of thoughts.
Yeah, I think, I really like what you're saying there, because essentially, you're talking about being present, right? And I guess when we're distracted by thoughts of what we might be experiencing outside, you do need something that's going to kind of come in and grab your attention, right? And I think that sort of dramatization can catch that attention and, engage you in a way where you almost forget what's happening outside, right? For that hour or 2 hours, however long you're there for.
And
And
maybe that helps also justify, maybe in the mind of a very demanding, let's say, learner, that
yeah,
might justify even the time that they dedicate to coming to your class and spending this time and energy to listen to what you have to say.
yeah, absolutely. Because I think, students do want to know that they're getting value and, that they're getting a good kind of use of their time. I think there's this perception sometimes that, that some students are just turning up to tick the box and, get the attendance. But I think everyone's time is valuable, right?
Of
And we do
course.
want to make sure that, they're getting the best value for the time that they're giving.
And thankfully, there's also so many technological tools that can even help or support or prompt even the shyest student. You can use Padlets if you don't want to ask questions directly in front of everyone. You can use Padlets as an
Yeah,
app to help them express their opinion. You can
yeah,
launch anonymous surveys. Uh, Technology has helped into that.
absolutely. And also, I think, changing up um, the kind of numbers of the groups that they work in, right? So sometimes, if they're in a big group, then you do see certain students will kind of shy away and, let a couple of people just dominate the conversation. But then sometimes if you go, right, okay, for this activity, I'm going to put you into pairs, and then they're just kind of having a conversation one-on-one, then they can sort of open up a bit more, they're a bit more comfortable, and and then that can help when they do come back into the group dynamic, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Now
So
that you mentioned, sorry,
go on. No, go for it.
okay, thank you. Now that you mentioned some students that they can be, always the same, that they will raise their hands and they will talk and they will have strong opinions. And again, yes, we want those students, but we also want to mobilize those that don't speak so much.
Yeah.
So sometimes a technique that I have found that can work in such instances is that after the fourth, fifth time that I ask a question and the same two, three hands are being raised, what I do then is that I pretend that I cry and I tell them, not again, you again. Always, using humor, of
Yeah,
course, never to insinuate something that, oh, I don't want to listen to you again, you have
yeah,
strong opinions or whatever, but using humor as a way of giving the stage to the others.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
have noticed that silence sometimes can be the best tool. I mean, if the teacher in a busy classroom keeps silent for some seconds, 10, 20 seconds, we are talking, not more, this can mobilize so many students. And first of all, if they do something else, they will just turn their head and say, okay, what's happening? This immediately, at that time, you have immediately won their attention. And the second stage in their minds within seconds is to, what is happening? Okay, I want to be in, fill me in. What happened? I want to be part of it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, small techniques.
I totally agree about the silence. I feel like rather than trying to get everyone to be quiet and listen, it's just good to just stand in the middle of the room, like dead silent. Everyone
Yes.
just stops talking. They're like, "What? What's going on?" you know. Um, so yeah, I think you're right. I think these small little techniques, they're good to have in your pocket, right, when you're teaching, and just use them. And I think it's about the contrast as well, right? Doing something different to what you usually do to grab attention, or different to what the norm is. And then, they get a little bit curious, like, oh, what's going on here? I remember I was teaching a workshop a few weeks ago, and I put some music on, like this time of the year, Strictly's on the TV, which is like I'm completely obsessed. And so I've got my own like Strictly Come Dancing music playlist, right? It's a bit
Mm.
sad. Now I should say to you not to laugh, but yeah, I've got all my kind of Latin music on there. So, I had like the students walking in and I had my music playing, and they were all just like, as they were walking in, I was just watching them, and they're like turning their heads and looking around like, what's going on here? Have I walked into the wrong classroom, or what's
Yeah.
happening here? But it's just anything that, grabs attention and gets them thinking, oh, this is something different. Let's get into a different mindset. I think it can definitely be quite helpful. So, Konstantinos, I want to ask you, when you're sort of bouncing around the classroom and you're being a bit of a clown, how do you ensure that you're balancing that with making sure that they're taking you seriously?
I think this is a matter of time. This is a thing that you build on. It's not something that you should expect from day one.
Yeah.
You have to you have to give time to students to get to know you. You have to be willing to show who you are, and only then can you create, the healthy premises on which a healthy and stable communication is established. Otherwise, if out of the blue, suddenly one day you start being such a clown and humorous and, performing, jumping from one end of the class to the other, and then the week after they just see someone standing in the desk and just doing a lecture, then they will say, okay, probably there's something wrong here. There's no sequence in
Yeah.
this person's behavior. So I believe that you should allow time to both sides, to yourself as a teacher, to develop and unfold all the skills, to feel also comfortable, and to students to get to know you, who you are, what is your style, let's say.
Mm. Absolutely. I think, and it goes back to, being your own self, right? And I think, if we are ourselves and we bring who we are to the classroom, then the students are able to see that consistency. Because you're right, if you just pull something out of nowhere, and the students are just going to be left kind of confused, like, okay, what's going on? I don't know what to expect. And maybe that can create a bit of uncertainty, right? And
Yes.
and I think it's important that there's, in all of this element of performance, there's got to be like a deep sense of trust there as well.
Exactly, yes. The issue of trust should always be at the back of your mind.
Yeah, 100%. I was just thinking as well about, like how how it varies depending on what you're actually teaching, right? Because sometimes the materials are such that they lend themselves well to performing what you need to in a certain way. But sometimes, you have materials that might be quite dry or complex. How do you deal with that in a higher education setting? Because I guess when you did it in the primary school, you had the kind of battlefield content, you turned the classroom into a battlefield. How do you handle that in a university context?
Look, I will use another example. Okay. A year ago, last year, every year in the winter term, I am teaching a heavy unit, module, let's say, which is called information warfare, and we talk with students about freedom of expression, hate speech, politics. Sometimes it can be kind of heavy, it's not this fun module that you can use humorous examples. Unavoidably, it talks about some heavy stuff that we all deal with in our daily life. So during one session, I wanted to make students understand how to search for information, how to build arguments, and how to cross-check their references and to come up with robust arguments. So I gave them a very provocative, let's say, topic as a seminar activity, and I told them, all of you have the same topic, but you will be divided into two groups. One group will be in favor of the topic, and you have to come up with arguments in favor of this. By the way, the activity was on hate speech, and where's the limit of the freedom of expression? Where does it become hate speech? And it was talking about racism. And the other half of the classroom, they should come up with arguments in favor of this, which was something, that students could never imagine having to take a stance in favor of racism. Okay. However, the point was not to come up with real, how can I say, the point was not to make them see, okay, racism can be good. The point was, and this is what they took away, and it was so beneficial for them, is that even for subjects that you might not feel necessarily equipped, you might not feel necessarily that you agree on, you can have the tools to search deeper and to use information for your arguments, to go against that or to build up on it and take the argument further. And that was a very beneficial, a very efficient way to teach a complex issue that is about building arguments and searching academic references.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so, it's so funny that you give that example today, because I was teaching earlier this morning, and we literally used this where I put the class into two halves and they developed arguments and they had a debate. And do you know what was really funny at the end? After, like they'd gone kind of back and forth and they'd had this debate with one another, we were closing off the activity. And then one of the guys in one of the groups said to me, oh, but like you haven't told us like who's won. And you know, like it just reminds you, right? Like, because we're all kind of kids inside, right?
Yes,
And you know, that element of turning it into a game, like in some ways, it sort of, you know, it made it fun for them, and you know, they got competitive about it. And so, you know, as you said, I mean, I kind of asked you the question because I don't personally believe that it's necessarily just about the material. It's what you do with it, right? And what techniques you apply to it to make it interesting. And I think you're completely right that, you know, because what you did there is you found a way for them to get invested and interested in finding out, because they had to use it to build an argument.
exactly.
And I think that that's so interesting. You know, I was watching this talk. It was quite recently, and it was quite funny. This man said, have you ever wondered why people don't care about global warming, even though it's a really serious issue and it might kill all of us? And then he does this brilliant impersonation of a scientist talking about global warming on the TV and trying to tell people why it's so important and they need to act. And, you know, I mean, I can't do it here, but you can just imagine, right?
I can, yes.
And the point was, it was so dry and unemotional that no one connects to it and feels compelled to act, right? But it's not about the information, you know, as we're saying. It's about what you do with it and how you present it or perform it. So I don't even know how the hour has like flown by. I did say to you
Really?
at the start, I was like,
just noticed.
But one thing I always ask my guests to prepare is a very quick masterclass for our listeners. So have you got something for us that you can share with our listeners?
Yes, of course. I have a very brief, let's say, into quotations masterclass.
Perfect.
Actually, very recently, I came up with the definition, the concept, sorry, of edutainer, meaning the educator that combines also entertainment. So for me, an edutainer is based on these four core pillars. First of all, it's the energy, it's the voice, the pace, and the rhythm that you can set the emotional temperature of the room. The second pillar is about storytelling, that even as we just said, the driest concepts and complex issues, you should remember that stories for humans are better than bullet points. What you said earlier also about the guerrilla and how that tells a story. The third element is the element of surprise by a provocative question, by a striking, a visually appealing image, or even the silence, as we just said. And the fourth, again, coming back to this discussion, is about authenticity, because if you think about it, students, they don't need a stand-up comedian. They need you, who you are, their teacher, but a slightly more amplified version, let's say, of who you are. That was my very brief masterclass.
That was brilliant. I loved it. I agreed with all of your points. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the show. This was such a great conversation. I'm also so happy with this term that I've learned from you, which is ceiling therapy. I'm going to be talking about it all week because I think I'm going to need a lot of it this week. And yeah, you know, I just love all the points that you've brought forward. I think this has been a really, really good conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Sima.
Thank you. And good night, everyone. We will be back with you again in the new year now, in January. So yeah, have a great time over Christmas and New Year. And I will be back with you all again in January 2026.
outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.